Now we will move to Thomas and Mariam, was our human factors specialist. They would like to talk about human factors and how it relates to Power to X. With a combined 20 years of experience, they bring expertise in applying human-centered principles to improve safety, performance, and usability in complex environments and organizations. Their work combines psychological research, practical application, and collaboration with frontline teams to ensure capacity, psychological safety based on reflections and learning. And I've looked very much forward to this, so please, Thomas and Mariam.
Thank you, Dita. Yeah, so Thomas, what is human factors and what does it mean?
Human factors is a scientific and practical discipline, and it is based on psychological research and empirical evidence and methods. The focus is on understanding and optimizing interactions between people and the products and technologies they use and the work systems they are working in, and also to optimize interaction between people and the organizational and physical environments.
But what is the purpose of optimizing interactions between, for example, people and technology?
The purpose is to increase efficiency and to improve safety. It's also to improve usability and ease of use of the technologies people are using and reduce use errors. We saw an example here just before presented by Patrick that use errors could result in leaks. It's also to support good and sustainable practices and create resilient systems in general.
So from what I understand, human factors is about understanding and optimizing interactions between people, products, and technologies. And it plays a role for everyday interactions, like driving a car or using a smartwatch. Is that so?
Yes, exactly. If you put yourself in the driver's seat of this Aston Martin sports car, you can be sure that human factors has been used to design the controls of the car. And products like a smartwatch, for example, the user interface has been optimized using human factors knowledge and methods. So human factors is in everyday interaction with technologies and products we use.
Interesting. So human factors works in everyday contexts and the user's experience. But how does it work in a industrial or a work setting, like in terms of performance and safety? How has that evolved over time?
There is a long tradition of human factors in relation to safety, and it actually goes back to the Second World War, where the focus was on pilot error in fighter planes and on human error in relation to radar operators watching out for enemy fighter planes. But the important point is that the focus in human factors has changed from the original perspective on individuals to a focus on systems instead. It has also changed from looking at the negative aspects of people to a more neutral approach. And this means that the narrative about human factors has changed from human error, which is now seen as an obsolete term, to human performance, which can be both positive and negative.
You mentioned that the perspective on people has changed over time and that the concept human error has become obsolete, but people still make mistakes. So how to explain that?
Yeah, you're perfectly right about that, but people do make mistakes. But if we look at it as a wall of bricks, we can see another perspective on the role of people. Everyday work is not perfect. Procedures can be inadequate or difficult to follow, and technology can be difficult to use. Like the bricks have small cracks and uneven surfaces, people are like mortar between the bricks. They fill in the gaps and they compensate and make things work, even under difficult circumstances. Thereby, they're making the system strong and resilient, just like a wall of bricks. So I think it's time also to ask a couple of open-ended questions to the audience. Please reflect on these two questions here during the rest of the presentation and put your comments in the chat. First one is, how do you integrate human factors in your organization, if you do that? And the second one is about how do you use human factors in your day-to-day operation? So, Marianne, please explain about what human factors can be used for example, in relation to organizational performance and optimization processes and efficiency.
Sure. So human factors can be used to improve safety and organizational performance. It will make processes, systems, and interaction more efficient and reliable. It involves everything from operational safety and sustainable performance to communication and situation awareness. And incorporating human factors not only increases organizational performance, it will also improve the well-being of the workers by focusing on creating better work conditions and processes and creating an environment where we set people up for success as opposed to failure.
But how do you create that environment? Where do you start?
Well, we start by being more bottom-up oriented by involving the frontline workers in the development and solution stages, by making them a part of the solution, by having a user-centered mindset, because traditionally a lot of industries have had this kind of top-down approach where the changes have been determined by management.
You mentioned involving frontline workers and making them co-creators of their own work conditions. So, from what I understand, this means that frontline workers should be involved in, for example, the design of the procedures they use and the design of their work environment and the work processes.
Yeah, exactly. By actively involving the frontline workers and making them co-creators of their own work processes, their own procedures, and the technologies that they use, it will strengthen their motivation. It will also foster a culture with a genuine sense of ownership, of trust, empowerment, all these good things, and it will also result in a long-term engagement.
But why is that a good idea?
Well, because it will lead to improved user acceptance and user adoption, and safe interactions with systems, equipment, infrastructure. Integrating human factors techniques in daily operations will facilitate and enhance learning and skill development. It will reduce errors, use errors in operations, incidents, and near misses, because people on the front line, they have a much better understanding of what's going on. They have that hands-on experience as opposed to project leaders and management. So ultimately, it's a good idea because it creates capacity and resilience. And naturally, we can't completely prevent people from making mistakes, but we can create the best possible work conditions and equip people to handle errors effectively when they do occur. In doing so, we make it safe to fail. And another way of applying human factors is by focusing on the technology and the design of the work environment, prioritizing a human-centered design in those interactions between people and technology. It creates better usability and intuitive user interfaces, especially used by people with specific needs and backgrounds.
But how do you incorporate human-centered design in interactions?
By tailoring the solutions to our natural human capabilities, our behaviors, our limitations, and those capabilities include physical and cognitive capabilities, because that will create better workflows. It will enhance those user experiences. It will lead to solutions that people can use with ease, with confidence, and there are different human factors methods to support that, like observational studies, eye tracking equipment, use error analysis, and so on. And these methods help us understand what's really causing the issues, those challenges, by uncovering and analyzing the underlying root causes and explanations behind them. So understanding how people interact with technology, systems, environments is essentially the gateway to efficiently and safely introduce new technology that people can learn better and faster. So I just explained how human factors can be used in general and what value it can create. But what's your opinion on how and why it's relevant in the Power to X industry? It's pretty much a new industry. How can this influence the value of bringing human factors in?
Yes, it is a new industry, and that's actually an opportunity to integrate human factors in the entire life cycle of it from the beginning. Integrating human factors from the beginning instead of just using it to solve problems later. It can be integrated in the design of, for example, facilities and control rooms. It's also relevant in operation, for example, in relation to communication, leadership, and culture. And if we combine human factors in design with human factors in operation, it means that it is used to optimize performance in the entire system. It is used to optimize performance on a strategic and a proactive level, and not only reactively fixing the problems as they occur.
Can you give some specific examples? What else can you optimize with the human factors?
Yes, I can, and I would like to make a reference to an article from Kate Shields published on LinkedIn in June 2023. I will drop a link to it in the chat after this presentation here. She talks about the role of human factors in hydrogen processing and transition. What she mentioned is that it is relevant in relation to interaction between people and technology. It's relevant to infrastructure design, control room design, to design of monitoring and control systems, and also in relation to maintenance and inspection. Apart from that, she mentioned that it is important to include human factors in the industry to mitigate human error. But because human error is becoming an obsolete concept, we could talk about improving human performance instead. Then she talks about using human factors to optimize operational efficiency, to design training and competence, and also to facilitate user acceptance and behavior. I've added one more point here. It's not in the Kate Shields article, but it is about how human factors can contribute to communication, leadership, and culture. But Miriam, do you have any examples of why you should use and involve human factors in the design of technology?
Yeah, matter of fact, I do. So it's important to involve human factors to support workers when interacting with technology and systems, because when technology isn't designed around users' needs and goals, the system forces the user to adapt. So human factors is especially critical when it comes to fitting the technology to the user, where historically we were adapting to the technology. And we've all seen and experienced those situations where we adapted to technology. A classic example is the keyboard layout, which was designed to prevent mechanical typewriters to jam. And even though there have been developed more ergonomic and efficient alternatives, we continue to use it because of the standardization and the familiarity. And this showcases a key human factor principle that when technology is not designed with people's needs in mind, the users will often compensate, and sometimes at the cost of efficiency, safety, and comfort. So having a user-centered approach means having an iterative process where we focus on the needs of the user every step of the way of that development lifecycle, and that is by evolving them. Because we've seen situations where the work conditions weren't designed with the workers' needs and goals in mind, and that have resulted in these self-made DIY interventions. So we have this example. This tells the story of doctors and nurses in a hospital who put sticky notes to remember certain information that supports their tasks. The work conditions weren't designed with the user-centered approach, so they adapted. They used simple and practical tools to fill in those gaps and keep track of important information.
So the nurses put up sticky notes to support their task, but I think it's fine. I get the job done. What's the problem?
Yes, it does work, but even though these user-compensated designs can be effective, there are some risks involved. First of all, you can see that the first sticky note, it's barely hanging on, and it's about to fall off. And if or when that happens, because it's highly likely, it's critical information, it could have fatal consequences, like giving the wrong dose or wrong medicine. And it also presents some other challenges when like training new workers in this environment, because would new employees be able to understand the system with or without the sticky notes? So this makes the work conditions and the systems pretty knowledge based, and that requires more resources, more time to train new employees. But involving human factors would make it more intuitive and also lead to better and faster learning, and of course, more integrated, so we don't risk that sticky note falling off.
But isn't this example you're giving here a good example of frontline workers co-creating their own work conditions, which you talked about earlier?
Yes, it is. It's a very good example. The thing is that we want them to be more integrated and more systematic. So this example that you see now is an example of a user-compensated solution that is a bit more integrated. These are consoles on a control sensor from the bridge of a ship, and in safety critical industries where various forms of control systems exist. Some handles and buttons can be easily accessible. So to prevent people to push a button by accident, these workers put an ashtray over it. They use what they had around, like an everyday object, and that's co-creation. That's what we want. It also makes people stop and reflect on whether they really want to perform this action, because these kind of situations that are critical and where processes have become routine and pretty much automatic, then an ashtray, as simple as that, but also effective, that's a bit more integrated. It stops the worker to reflect, and it's more integrated than like the sticky note. But if human factors was involved in the beginning, the solutions would be more systematic and sustainable for a long-term performance. Like the equipment manufacturers would be able to implement these from the beginning. And that also illustrates another key human factors principles, that co-creation leads to safe and more intuitive solutions, especially in safety critical environments, and that user adaptation can often reveal these gaps and opportunities for improvement in designs and technologies and systems. Yeah, so I just explained and give some examples of how human factors can be used to create value when it comes to the design of technology equipment. But let's talk about how human factors works in an operational context. Can you give an example of that?
Absolutely. And I would like to take you to the offshore oil and gas drilling context, and a company called Noble. Noble is a drilling contractor, and I would like to bring up an example of how we work with transforming the safety culture in this organization based on human factors. This is, of course, a context where occupational safety is in focus. We can see that people are using heavy equipment, lifting heavy loads with cranes, etc. So there's a lot of opportunities to become injured. It's also an environment where operational safety is important in relation to major accidents. And like this one here, the Macondo accident. So this is also a context where it is where safety is extremely important and where human factors can play a role.
How do you normally learn and develop safety-wise in the oil and gas industry? And what was it you wanted to do with Noble?
Yeah, the tradition has been to look at failures and learn from them, and that has been so for many decades in that industry. But failures are rare, so we wanted to create a culture where the organization not only learns from failure, but also from successful work and learn from what we call what good looks like.
So you explained how you transformed the Noble's learning culture from learning from failure to learning from success. What else did you include in the safety culture transformation?
We combined the learning from success approach with some other contemporary human factors and safety principles. This was based on what is called the New View by Sidney Dekker. And as we see in this table here, it's about changing the view on people from people being the source of failure and a problem to control to people being part of the solution. It's about changing how safety is defined as the absence of negative things, of the absence of incidents, to defining safety as the presence of a capacity in the system. It's also about changing the narrative from talking about human error to talk about human performance instead. And of course, also from learning from failure to learning from success.
You talked about defining safety as the presence of capacity rather than the absence of incidents. What do you exactly mean by that?
What I mean by that is that accidents will happen, but when they happen, it's important we design the system so it's safe to fail, as you also mentioned earlier. So if you take this example here and look at that, this is an old Volvo ad from the 1990s. And we can see here that the idea is that the car is designed to protect what is most valuable in case of an accident. We cannot eliminate the accident, but we can make sure that the passengers and driver inside the car are still safe, even if they come into an accident. The body of the car has a capacity to protect and make it safe to fail. This is a technical capacity, but it could also be a human capacity and very often is in many contexts.
How do you use the perspective change introduced by Sidney Dekker in practice? And what does it mean when you say that people are the solution?
It means that we need to establish a new way of creating safety as a supplement to the existing. You talked about top-down and bottom-up processes, and the existing way of creating safety in an organization is very often based on rules, regulations, formal systems, and procedures. And this is about what to avoid. But we must establish a bottom-up approach focusing on involvement and reflections by the frontline workers and focusing on people being a capacity. And this is very much about what to reinforce. So using the ideas from Sidney Dekker means that we want frontline workers to be invited to co-create their own work conditions. Thereby, safety becomes something we create together in the frontline teams and not just something pushed from management.
What do you need to be able to develop this bottom-up approach in the organization?
We need three things in this. We need a mindset, we need a skill set, and a tool set. Changing the mindset in the organization is about changing it to the new view from introduced by Sidney Dekker. We also want to develop a skill set, for example, leadership skills and skills in the frontline workforce. And finally, we want to create a tool set to support the mindset and the skill set which means actions and methods which can be used in daily work.
Can you explain a little bit more about the mindset and how this is reflected in the skill set?
Absolutely. The mindset is based on this triangle here, we call it triangle of trust. And the first side is about empowering our people, that we see people as part of the solution and engage them as co-creators. The second one is about embracing variability, that people come with different perspectives, different experience, different ideas. And by embracing them and inviting them, we get new perspective on how things can be done in a more efficient and better way, and in a more safer way. And finally, when we are reinforcing what is working, we are looking at what is strong and trying to do more of that, and not focusing as much as on what is wrong.
You also mentioned a tool set. What does that look like, and who's going to use it?
The toolset is a collection of methods, processes, and action used in the daily work, which is aligned with the mindset. And here's an example of some of the tools, and it is still work in progress. It will be used on board the drilling rigs and the drill ships by the leaders on board, the supervisors, and the frontline workers.
So it seems that the frontline workers have a lot of work already, and in addition to that, you want them to learn and use 10 new tools. Doesn't that just add extra workload in the busy life of a frontline worker?
That's a very good point. And there's actually also a fatigue when it comes to new tools and new systems. So what we did was that we took existing tools and modified them slightly to align them with the new mindset. This means that they don't have to learn completely new tools, but they only need to learn how to use the tools they are already using on a daily basis in a slightly different way. And that is what we call, it is not about what we do, it's about how we do it. To give an example of that, I could mention the transition to work meeting, also called the toolbox talk. Before a job, the team will discuss the planning and the safety of the job ahead of them. This can be done as a tick box exercise where the supervisor asks closed questions and the team will answer yes, sir, to that. Or it can be done in a way where the supervisor invites participants to reflect, give their perspective on the job, and provide their comments and ideas on how to do it. By asking open-ended questions, he is inviting his team to do that. It's the same tool and toolbox talk, but it is done in a completely different way.
Based on the mindset, skill set, and tool set, could you give a quick overview over the elements in the safety culture program from a more practical perspective?
Yes, I can. First of all, we branded the safety culture program in Noble and called it Noble Peak. We developed playbooks, which are handbooks for the frontline workers and also for what we call 3C coaches. 3C coaches are safety professionals which are on board on any rig at any given time. There's always one 3C coach on board which can support this safety culture transition. We also made instruction videos and we made presentations in PowerPoint as learning materials, and we put that up on a Noble Peak Hub on SharePoint. And we're also working on integrating it with a leadership program in Noble called Peak Leadership. This is also still work in progress, so we are constantly developing this.
That sounds great. And I assume that the combination of mindset, skill set, and tool set will optimize performance. But are there any other positive effects?
Yes, and creating a work environment where workers are invited to speak up and co-create and become part of the solution has many positive side effects. First of all, the empowerment makes people feel a higher sense of ownership. Thereby, they become more motivated, and speaking up in the team supports psychological safety. And it all leads to better well-being of the workers, which is, of course, also very good. With this example from Noble and the offshore oil and gas drilling industry, our presentation has come to the end. But before we close, and as a conclusion, what would you say connect the dots in what we've just discussed, Mariam?
I would say that if there are a few things you should take away from this, from what we've discussed, it's that human factors is about seeing people as capacity and not as something to be dealt with. It's about involving frontline workers in designing both the technology and the work conditions. And last but not least, it's about creating a culture of trust and psychological safety based on bottoms-up reflections and learning. Yeah. And that's pretty much it from us. Thanks for joining us today and for listening to us. We hope it was insightful. And yeah, we would love to continue the conversation. So if you have any questions or just a tiny bit curious to know more, feel free to reach out to any of us.